So regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. AG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you are paid with federal dollars, please let us know now.
As you're aware, I'm paid with federal funds, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG, RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I've got there.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Costello. And moving on to item number 3, approval of June 16, 2021 meeting summary.
Move to approve.
Motion.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
I'm sorry. Do we get aye? Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, election of the TPC chair and vice chair. All right, guys, we get into the third part. All right, I'll open up to the committee and nominations.
Can I say something real quick? Just
Absolutely.
For clarification.
Absolutely.
So the only restrictions are that they can't be this represent the same jurisdiction and this is chair and vice chair of TPC, of the regional council chair and vice chair. So right now that would be Oro Valley and Sahuarita, not in that order. So
All right, so leave those.
so even if you wanted to do it again, so that's the only
That's
restriction.
news. Jose's heard all
Yeah, there
day.
you go. That's some good news right there.
I'm brokenhearted.
All right, guys, it's open up to the committee.
So in that case, Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate Diana Alarcon from the city of Tucson for chair.
You got a nominee? Any further nominees? None? I'd like to also, what about the vice chair?
Vote first on this, or do we
Well, we can do that too.
do
We
a
can-
slate?
You know what? Let's do that. Okay, all those in
We should do each
favor?
one separately.
Let's do them separate. All right, so we got, we have a nominee, Dan Caron from the city of Tucson. And there's no other ones, so I guess it's a pretty straightforward. All those in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Dan.
Yay.
Or condolences.
Is Diane?
All right. Is Dan there?
Diane on?
She's not, but she did confirm that she would be happy to serve.
You can give her the good news.
Yes.
She may be able to join us later, but in the meantime, I'm here in her place.
All right, great. Moving on to, okay, vice chair.
Rod, would you kill me if I nominated you?
Yes.
All right, have a nomination.
Yeah, I don't think ADOT is, I think it should be more of a regional function to participate as a chair on that and a vice chair. It's just my personal opinion.
All right, I'll withdraw.
All right, do we have another brave soul out there?
Mr. Chair, I'll nominate Keith.
All right, we have Keith. Any further nominees? All right, hearing none, let's go for a vote. All those in favor of Vice Chairman Keith Brand from Town of Marana, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Keith. I mean, Mr. Brand, Vice Chair. Well, we normally turn it over to the chair, but since it's not available, I turn it over to the vice chair.
Oh, it takes effect immediately?
Right, immediately. Yeah.
Right, so.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Okay. Okay, next item is item number 5, the fiscal year 22-26 tip amendment and program and federal funds. Carolyn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Carolyn Laurie. I'm the PAG Regional Planner. and I'll be presenting on this item. Fiscal year 22 to 26, TIP amendment number 20 to 22.010, programming federal funds pursuant to the June 25th, 2021 Notice of Funding Availability, or NOFA. We are asking for the TPC to recommend approval of an amendment to the FY 22 to 26 TIP for the allocation of available STBG funds for RTA projects based on regional requests submitted to PAG. Next slide, please.
Okay. So we went over this, was it a week or 2 weeks ago? We went over this in depth at the TIP meeting, I believe. So this is they only had the one request, I believe, that was moved forward, only one application.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair. And today we're requesting that the TPC recommend eligible projects consistent with the NOFA requirements for further consideration for funding by the RTA board.
Okay. Before we do any motions, is there any further discussion beyond what was discussed at the TIP meeting? Pretty much the same players. Okay, I'd be happy to entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, item number 6, review of project requests for the CRSA funding, which is also something that moved forward from the TIP. Carolyn?
Okay. So in this item, we'll be reviewing eligible projects requested for supplemental funding using CRISA federal funding pursuant to the June 25th, 2001 Notice of Funding Availability, and also subject to the August 11th, 2021 TIP subcommittee recommendation. The recommended action is for eligible projects consistent with the NOFA and requirements for further consideration to be funded by the RTA board. Thank you.
Okay. So in this case, I recall from the TIP meeting, we had 2 projects that moved forward, but those 2 projects exceed the total NOFA availability amount. So is there anything that's going to be done at this level with the TPC, or is this still just a recommendation of the projects being eligible moving forward to the board at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a great question. So at this point, what we're asking is for the TPC to determine if the project should indeed move forward. And if so, the funding will be awarded by the RTA board. So we're not asking you to discuss the funding amounts, just the merit of the projects moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So if I recall, there was also significant discussion and fairly unanimous decision on which projects move forward and the 2 projects at this time. Be happy to entertain a motion unless there's any further discussion on these items.
I move those 2 projects move forward.
Okay, there's been a motion to move forward. Is there a second?
I second.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mr. Braun.
Okay, next item is item number 7, overview and discussion of the Regional Pavement Management Systems Data Program and use of automated road analyzer van. Paul Casatano.
Mr. Vice Chair, we have today with us staff from the Tucson Department of Transportation and Mobility who administer this program on behalf of the region. That's done through an agreement with PAG, whereby consistent data is collected throughout the region and made available for the asset owners, the member jurisdictions, for them to utilize in developing pavement rehabilitation programs within each jurisdiction. So what we'd like to do today is let the DTM staff reacquaint you all with this program. And then we're hoping to move into a good exchange with the pavement practitioners from there in the months to come and essentially reactivate that group and move the program forward to meet the needs of the region. So With that, I'll turn it over to James Castaneda and the DTM group. And if there are any questions, I'll leave that to James to manage. I think it may be easier to hold those questions to the end. But again, it's up to James if he wants to take those in the middle there.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned.
Hang on, James, we're having an issue with your volume. We don't know if it's your mic pickup. We can hear you, just you're faint.
Let me apologize. Let me grab a
Oh, no.
outside.
Full gamer mode.
Is that a little better to hear?
Not really.
You're gonna wanna, James,
Yes.
check your audio in the Zoom and change it over to that headset if it didn't ask you automatically.
Okay, I
It's in the
apologize.
bottom, it's in the control panel of Zoom where it says audio next to the mute.
It still shows me seeing Crystal's screen view options.
So do you see the control panel at the bottom where it says share screen? Oh, hold on. Okay, go ahead and try it now in your audio settings of that Zoom control panel. Do you see it down? So there should be an area at the bottom that says, it might be at the top. I apologize. It could
Okay,
be
is that-
either.
Is that better?
No.
No?
Did it let you switch it?
No, it didn't let me switch it. I apologize. Switch.
Do you see where the mute option is? There's a little arrow next to it. Click on that arrow and then it should allow you to select a microphone.
Okay, selected headphones.
Uh-huh.
Okay, how about now?
Try moving that mic a little closer to your face.
Is that a little better? Hopefully.
Yeah, let me see if I can turn up the volume in the room.
Okay, I apologize to the members. We typically use Teams and I haven't had issues with Zoom before, but
Now it's getting better.
I apologize.
You know, we're increasing the volume on our end.
Okay.
I think we're good. I think we're good. Please,
Okay.
Go ahead, James.
Sorry about that that rocky start there, but as Paul mentioned, my name is James Castaneda and I run the regional pavement program for the city of Tucson. And I'd like to provide the committee this morning just a brief overview of who we are, where we have been, and then hopefully pivot towards where we can be in the future. So with that, I'd like to, I don't believe I'm active on the screen now. There we go. So who we are. Our current team consists of 3 individuals, myself as program coordinator. I've been in this role since May of this year, so fairly new, as well as 2 engineering associates, Julie Davis and John Lynn. And we currently have a posting out for a 3rd engineering associate that we are in the process of recruiting. We are also supported by DTM Administrator Todd Kessler, who is here in attendance. And among this group of currently 3 people, we do have a wide range of duties related to pavement management, but maintain specialized roles in local streets, major streets, and ARAN data collection and processing. So to provide a brief history of where we have been, the main objective of the regional pavement program is to collect and provide roadway data to fulfill federal reporting obligations. Now, these obligations come by way of providing roadway mileage data, as well as international roughness index data, which is IRI data, that is reported to the feds on federally functionally defined roadways. In June 2017, ADOT entered a 5-year contract with an outside vendor to collect and report this data on behalf of the state. So what has that meant for the regional pavement program team? Since June, the regional team has continued to collect data on those same functionally defined roadways. However, reporting of that data has been limited to the PAG regional jurisdictions, so no longer reporting to ADOT and no longer reporting to the federal government. In addition to collecting data on the federally functionally defined roadways, the program has also assisted our regional partners with various components of their individual pavement management programs, such as local street inspections, whether that has been by way of PACER inspection or PCI inspection. Additionally, we have held regional task force meetings. Now, these are meetings of the technical staff among each member jurisdiction's pavement management team. And those are really to discuss progress, projects, and troubleshoot problems in a collaborative effort among peers that kind of do the same thing just among the member jurisdictions. And finally, to provide additional pavement management support. So kind of seeing this program as a resource, supplemental resource pool to help with items such as public outreach. We attended Marana, a Public Works Day, the GIS Fair, have helped with Pima County with some stuff at the San Joaquin Road test section and items of that nature. So the primary piece of equipment that we use to collect the data on functionally defined roads is the ARAN van. I know many of the committee members may be familiar with this van, but just to give a brief overview, the current ARAN was acquired in 2012 and is equipped with 15 sensors to measure roadway distresses. Primary among those are cracking data, so longitudinal transverse cracking, as well as fatigue cracking, the international roughness index data IRI, and rutting. And it is worth mentioning that the van does require a substantial amount of investment in time for maintenance of vehicle hardware and software. To give a brief example, we are currently down as the last collection day we had a week or so ago. We had an inverter fail and currently are working with the service provider and the manufacturer to get that back up and running, but just one of the things that we run into in normal collection cycle collecting. And it's also worth noting that collection can be prohibited by environmental constraints such as inclement weather, which can yield excessive debris on the roadway, as well as extreme heat or cold. We have had a very active monsoon season so far, so currently we are cautious about collecting roads with at-grade crossings that may have excessive amount of sand and vegetation in them that could skew the data. So we're cognizant of that, and that's something that we have to work around when we are planning our collection. So finally, looking forward, this is really where I want to spend most of our time in discussion. 2020 was a rough year, as I'm sure everyone in this room can attest to, but we did perform the annual preventative maintenance on the ARAN in early 2020 as scheduled. We are geared up for a 2020 collection cycle, but due to the implications of the pandemic, we had to suspend collection as you need 2 people to be in the van in close proximity for extended periods of time. Just felt that it wasn't feasible at the time to continue with that. But since July of this year, we have resumed collection and are now back in the van, barring our current problem with the inverter. But with that, with changes in staff and the renewal of our PAG contract for 2022, it is now, I feel, a perfect time to bring the group back together and see what this program can do to meet your individual needs. So one idea would be to potentially change the workflow. Typically, we would report annual annually on the pavement data collected for the previous year. The thought is, something we can discuss is to increase that to incremental reporting and progress updates, possibly on a quarterly timeline, if that benefits member jurisdictions. Additionally, and this is a key item for me, it's to reestablish the regional pavement task force. Again, that's a group of technical individuals in each jurisdiction that oversee the pavement management programs. And with that establishment, to kind of reinvigorate and see how this group, this regional pavement management team, can serve as that supplemental labor pool to see what jurisdiction specific requests are needed and how we can help us, each of our partners, meet those requests. So with that, I'd like to open it up to some questions and discussion.
You also collect data for local roads?
We have in the past, yes. Currently, or the most recent ones have been for the city of Tucson, but we have in the past collected data on local roads.
Because my staff told me otherwise. That's the reason why I was like, whoa, it's local road now.
And those have come, I should qualify that. Those have come by way of PACER inspection. So that's a surface, pavement surface rating inspection, and also helping with PCI, which is more of a field inspection where you'd get out and measure actual distresses in a sample section of roadway.
Right.
So
James?
if I'm wrong, I was under the understanding that there are limitations for the types of roadways that the van can collect tracking, running, and IRI. There's a speed threshold as well, and kind of limits the local level data collection that can be collected by the van. Thusly, that's
correct in that
windshield survey PASER approach was selected.
Yes, so the van has a speed threshold of around 12 miles per hour. I should say minimum speed threshold, at which traveling below that speed invalidates the international roughness, the IRI data. So that typically isn't a problem on major streets or HPMS routes, but local streets, it does present an issue with maintaining a low speed in local areas, frequent stops and turning. So that could present some problems, correct?
Is there another question online?
Yeah, actually, I had a question. James, how does the van get scheduled? Like, how do they decide what streets are getting picked up?
So what that looks like is we have a basically a database of route lists that are based off of the most recent federally, or actually we get them from ADOT HPMS routes, and we group them together kind of in a pattern that makes sense for what would be about 80 to 100 miles of collection in a day. And we have that split. So we have the network of PAG, of the PAG region split in half, and we collect half of those routes in 1 year and then the second half the next. So a lot of that, I will say, to the environmental factors. So knowing that if there's rain in certain areas or certain roads have or will be impacted by debris, we take all that into account. So it's kind of a dynamic shift, but something that we have relatively figured out.
So in theory, every jurisdiction should see the van, every other year, essentially.
Yes, in theory, or the route lists aren't necessarily broken out at jurisdiction boundaries. So there's a good chance it could be every year, depending on what is collected. But there's a chance it could be, we may collect roads, say in Oro Valley every year.
Well, because I guess my concern is I've been here for 4.5 years and I've never seen the van. So how do I rectify that? Because I'm assuming I have some PAG routes and everything else.
Yes, the town of Sahuarita does have federally functionally defined routes. If it would be to the benefit, we can coordinate when we're going to be in the area and potentially even meet with members of the technical staff of your staff if you'd like, and we'd be happy to do that to
That would be
provide that
great.
coordination.
Well, this is Jason Bahi, Hoskiaki tribe.
Hi.
Hi. So I've been with the tribe for a little less than 2 years, and I just wanted to know if the van has been on the reservation to sample the roads we have on site.
I can speak to the 2019 year. We did collect some roads. I would have to look at our route list to see which ones those were. But I can tell you in the area of Valencia and Camino de Oeste, we were out in that area in 2019 in that cycle year.
Okay, so that's off reservation though. I'm talking about on reservation.
Specifically reservation, I would have to check the list to see, or if you had specific routes that you were wondering about, if you had those in mind, I can reach out to you and we can see when those fall in our collection cycle.
Okay, no, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Any further questions?
Sure.
Yes.
Oh, just one more. Where James, where can we
Okay.
access the information that you've collected?
So currently we have it hosted on a OneDrive cloud account. And if you haven't received, we previously, I will say historically, we had been using a different platform, which was, I want to say it's, oh, I'm drawing a blank. But we have recently switched to OneDrive, and we will share out those links. We will make sure that each of the jurisdictions have the links. We have uploaded the most recent few years of data on there as a backup. But if you don't have access, we will make sure that everyone here in this group and the technical staff does get access to the platform where all that data is hosted.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yes, James, you mentioned that the ADOT's got a contract with I guess, to collect data, payment information, payment data. Does that also include the jurisdictions, collectors or interiors, or is that just ADOT facilities? Do you know?
I'm not fluent on the extent of the collection, but I suspect that it would be the highest level of what the federal government has defined as like the highest level of functional class. I can inquire with ADOT. I also believe it may be sample data, so potentially not the whole run, but a sample area on, say, an interstate or SR 210 or whichever route we're discussing. But it may not be the full run as we collect, which would be endpoint to endpoint. But I can research that and provide clarity.
Any further questions online or in the room?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Sam.
Hi, James. This is Anna from Pima County.
Hi.
How do we get the data? What does it look like at the end? As you know, we're using the PCI, Payment Condition Index result. Does the van provide that result? Could it give us a PCI rating for our roads?
So the data that we collect is what it will look like is a large database with a bunch of different distresses measured as value quantities. The way the program works, it basically spits out all the data in a spreadsheet essentially, and it does not aggregate it into one number. If it would benefit the region and our regional stakeholders to work through that to see how that mirrors a PCI or a pseudo PCI. I know PCI typically has 19 different distresses that it looks like on asphalt roadways. The van equipped with the sensors it has doesn't collect every measurement that would be needed to perform a full PCI. But at the city, we've been kind of working through what that could look like as a pseudo PCI. So taking the measurements that is provided and seeing how that relates to a PCI or pseudo PCI. If that's something of interest to the members in Pima County, that's something we can work with your technical staff and see if we can get something that's a usable number or at least a usable substitute for that.
Okay, thank you.
And I will say, Todd, do you have any additional, something I left out? I know I went through quite a bit, but
Yeah,
something like that.
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, I guess first off, is my volume okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Here you go.
Okay, great. Todd Kessler, I'm an administrator of management systems at DTM and have been involved with this program for quite some time. So I did have my hand up there. I didn't know if it'd be appropriate to interrupt there, but I did want to help James out addressing some of the previous questions as well as the recent one. Kind of reverse order, I guess. The previous platform where data was shared out was Dropbox, and historically those would be kind of shared out through a PAG share. The city's migrated to Microsoft 365 and everything's on OneDrive. So that data has been, from years back to present, has been moved to that platform. And I believe we were trying to get that out via PAG, but we can absolutely make sure we get that directly to folks if it's not making its way to jurisdictional personnel. In regards to not seeing the vehicle, I think that was Town of Sarita and Pascagoula Tribe. I think one thing we need to emphasize here is the federal functional classification map are the routes that, so if we go to ADOT's website and just search functional class map, you'll be able to see those are essentially the routes that we collect with the vehicle for the region. And as James spoke to, we're not reporting those up to the state through the traditional HPMS. Back in the day, it would be provide IRI data, the database essentially from our vehicle, as well as each jurisdiction would go to a website to fulfill the other part of the HPMS reporting requirements, the big 6, and we'd be trained annually through the PAG, under the PAG umbrella would coordinate that, and folks would be trained how to do that. That's kind of gone away because of the ADOT contract. So in terms of routes being collected, it's essentially major streets. Jose, to your question, right? The arterials and collectors, generally that is what would be synonymous with the federal class map, plus or minus some stuff on the edges. So we have not collected local streets. Now, to be fair to the program, we've conducted through years times in previous meetings, really as a task force consensus. And Paul, hopefully you can help me out here, but we did have all of those types of discussions, and it shouldn't be surprising that we had agreed really not to collect local streets. I think, to try to keep it very simple terminology, it's the level of detail required to manage our local streets. Putting $1 million vehicle to drive all the pavement to get all those distresses. The consensus was, well, we can really make our pavement management decisions without that level of detail. Now, time has evolved, and I think this gets to, Anna, your question. If we need to revisit that because we want to get a overall condition index number from sensor data consistent across the region, we should absolutely work as a task force to define what that number looks like. The strategy to date that I can speak to is to provide an unbiased, if you will, level of sensor data in terms of a database. So comprehensive database with all these different distresses that are sensor-based, running in both wheel pass, International Roughness Index, and both wheel pass plus the average thereof, the longitudinal transverse cracking, fatigue cracking, that data has been provided in terms of columns of data. And we've left it to jurisdictions to interpret and come up with what they warrant overall condition index that makes sense for their jurisdiction. It kind of left that up to the jurisdictions. And if we need to evolve that, I think that's what James has alluded to a little bit with getting our task force meetings back up to, we're meeting more frequently, we're re-engaging in previous conversations and reevaluating. Perhaps we need to look at that again and come up with an overall condition index that we as a region agree to. This has kind of been an iterative conversation. Again, Paul Castellano, help me out. But I recall even conversations about having a centralized database at PAG and everybody used the same data the same way. And we really agreed at the task force level that's not really what we wanted to do at that time, because we had our own flavors, right? Each jurisdiction kind of had their own way to want to look at the data. And so the strategy has been since then and consistently, here's the data for your interpretation. So I guess I don't want to ramble too much on that, but to clarify, local streets, we did at one point, and this was with our older ARAN vehicles. So we used to have an ARAN 4300. We through this program upgraded it. With that vehicle, we did make the rounds through every asphalt paved roadway within the county. I'm sure you can find one straggler out there that we missed, but for the most part, that effort did happen, and that data was provided each of the jurisdictions. But we haven't reestablished that because, again, those conversations through the technical task force were that we really don't necessarily need that level of detail on local streets. They're paved generally at the same time, they're in similar condition, and we kind of fell back onto that pacer windshield type survey, right? 1 to 10 rating, as opposed to that level of detail. And that's for resources and otherwise. But we're happy to have all those discussions again, if we can get the technical staff together to figure out what that needs to look like. So maybe I'll pause and hopefully that shed light on some things.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may, Todd and James have it absolutely correct. We have had discussions in previous years about the potential of establishing a regional OCI. The consensus at that time was there are different flavors of OCI per jurisdiction, so let's just leave it there. And we've always tried to balance between being able to provide consistently collected data and allowing the asset management function to take place at the local level. So we do want to reconnect, and we want to continue to have those fruitful conversations. If there's things that we can do better to evolve the program, we most certainly want to look at that so that there's value at the local agency level. We're also very interested in getting beyond a better way to display that performance measure entry point for pavement conditions. Right now, as you may know, we show an IRI map, which it's a way to enter into, there's a pavement issue there, but it doesn't really provide all that much meaningful information about what's actually going on with the pavement, because it is a roughness index only. So we have interest in pursuing a regional OCI that may have a common set of parameters for all jurisdictions. And then if there are jurisdictions that want to do their own localized OCI or pavement condition index, that may be an option. That at the regional level, these 7 parameters are better than an IRI rating and give us a regional OCI, but Oro Valley has 14 total parameters that they establish their OCI on. So we want to have those conversations. I think there's a lot that could come from that, but we're not all the way there yet.
Catherine had
Okay.
Yes,
Hi.
Catherine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Catherine Skinner from Pima County. I'm curious, do we have an estimate of how many miles are run by the van per year, to just kind of get a notion? I know we have allotted about 450,000 of STP a year going to the program. So do we know how much that covers in terms of mileage?
In our average for the past few collection years has been around 1,500 miles of roadway each year.
Okay. For just a frame of reference for the committee, the county went out and contracted for a van to run all of our network, including the local roads. So that's about 1,900 miles. And it costs $215,000 to run those 1,900 miles and get a PCI for all of those roads, which is how we're programming and prioritizing for our pavement program. But that's just a frame of reference. And I know one of the struggles we've had is, the task force meetings. I'm not sure when the last one was held. I reached out to staff to try to get an idea of when the last task force was, and it was 2+ years ago. I recall, just like you said, Todd, some of those conversations, but I think they're going back to 2016 or more. And so I think it's really important, as we're putting nearly $500,000 a year to this program, that we're all finding a benefit in the region. And I know we haven't at the county been able to utilize this data in recent years. So we're really not getting anything, because the raw data we can't do anything with.
Jose?
Actually, I was gonna ask the same thing. When are they gonna have our next task force meeting? Because I know it's been a while. I spoke to staff and they said the last time, I think it's been over 2 years or something like that. So just wondering if you can get back together and so that you guys can come together as a region, so that when we do report OCIs, we're all consistent on our methodology. Some guys are doing pagers, some are doing PCIs, and then when we report our OCI, well, they're not really consistent.
So Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee, this program is now newly under me again. So I do have hopes that we can reinitiate that task force and get back to regular meetings. There was a point in time at which the local agencies were kind of doing their own thing, and I think the agency PAG kind of just let that happen. And so I'm hearing very clearly that there's more desire and opportunity for us to take a convener role. And I think we're very willing to do that in order to get the right people in the room and have the conversations to move the program forward. I will clarify from Ms. Skinner's comments that while there is almost 450,000 allocated within the budget, that's not typically the expenditure for the entire program per year, at least based on what I was experiencing when I had the program several years ago. So there's 450 allocated, but I don't think that's the total expenditure for the staff, the van maintenance, and the collection and processing of data. All the same, there's brand new methods out there, and we really need to start looking at how this program should be reshaped moving forward for sure.
This is Robin, Mr. Chair or Vice Chair, members of the committee. I finally learned how to figure out the hand raising item. I completely agree with everything that's been said. We have probably not used this equipment to the best of our ability throughout the region to have some sort of really standard way of looking at them. And I think processing the information and how we want to do that and what we want to end up with, I think the equipment could actually help us. But I really, really agree with having the committee reformed, because I think those conversations at staff level to make sure that we're all complementing each other's efforts, so we're not spending each too much money in any given area, and we're all benefiting from this regional asset. I think that's a great first step, and thank you, Paul, for putting that subcommittee back together.
I have one more question.
Yes, Catherine.
Thank you. I brought a copy of the OWP, and there's 2 points of clarification that I'm just not quite sure on. 2 of the outcomes that are required in the OWP that I'm trying to understand if we're still responsible for them or PAG is, or if it's ADOT, is the IRI data reporting to FHWA, and then the annual HPMS data report via the ADOT website. I think I'm hearing that no longer is that a function that we have to do at the region, but it's handled by ADOT. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, Ms. Skinner, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the committee. That's a recent change based off of the performance measure requirements, which require collection on the national highway system. And as Mr. Castaneda said, I believe there's also some sampling that takes place of other portions of the network. So ADOT used to leave that to the local agencies to pull that data up through ADOT into FHWA. after that performance measure requirement was changed, they took a look at what the statewide collection needs are. And so that shifted their program a little bit. In the meantime, our PAG program was still doing the full set of collection on the entire federal functional class. So the reporting up is not a requirement, but the data collection still exists.
Okay. Well, I'll echo what Robin said. We're excited to meet again and find, improve our methods, just restart the conversation. So we're getting more benefit out of this program.
I'll say that for the town of Marana, we're using it twofold. We're using it both in forming our decisions on pavement maintenance, but we also use it. We adjusted our ordinance for moratorium right-of-way cuts to be based off of OCI, not pavement age. So we are using this data for that purpose too.
Yeah, so the only comment I would add is that, if it's a regional fund that's being used, all of us need to find a benefit. And I don't know if one van and one system is going to be able to provide everybody the same benefit. So, if you use OCI, we use PCI. So if the program can't deliver those two, we're both spending additional money to get that, to change it or modify it. So I think that should be part of the conversation of how that regional funding is divided for best use for all of us.
James, Todd, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, item number 8, fiscal year 21-22 Transportation Plan Committee calendar, TPC calendar. Because I'm responsible for that.
Yep.
I'm assuming that we're going to keep it on the Wednesdays at 9 o'clock, third Wednesday, right?
Every month, or?
Is it, well, I think we don't need to necessarily meet every month, but I think there was discussion about wanting to increase the number of times we did meet. I know that, regional council had pulled back the number of times they met, which then trickled down to the number of times we needed to meet. But I mean, there might be one or two we could skip during the summer, but for the most part, I think we want a full calendar throughout the year.
I would agree.
If I can answer your question on the third Wednesday, 9 o'clock. I'm assuming that we would count out
Yes.
frequency of meetings.
We want the same time frame. We've all got it blocked in our calendars for years.
Yeah, and it feeds into the higher committees. That's what's the third Wednesday. So
Yes. So aside from missing a couple of meetings in the summer when there's really nothing going on, maybe I think sometimes January is usually a meeting that's not really necessary, if I recall, but we should keep it on the calendar and then cancel them as needed, I would say.
A lot easier to just scratch it off. And
Yeah.
try to put it in there because people tend to fill up the calendar.
I absolutely agree with all that. We need to have them on the calendar every month. And then if we need to cancel them, then it's much easier than trying to put another meeting on.
Yes.
okay.
And I mean, I don't know if we can add on our meetings to talk about what we'd like to discuss at the next meeting, like the next
Future agenda items.
Yeah, so that we can, maybe even at the end of the existing meeting where we could decide, yes, we need to hold the next meeting, or, even no, we don't have to. So, PAG staff has to get things out
Sure.
in time, so.
I think we've informally done that in the past where we would kind of get into a discussion, decide that would be at the next meeting, but a future agenda item on the agenda would be helpful.
That's a different conversation that we're not prepared to have today.
We're not allowed to
no, no.
modify the agenda.
Without notifying the public at least 24 hours in advance.
Well, I'm not saying we're,
I'm talking about today. So the none of
no,
the other-
we can't discuss future agenda items because you don't have it on the agenda. What we're saying is going forward, we'd like for that to be a standing item on the agenda.
No, I understood that. I just want to point out that is not something that's on any of the other PAG committee agendas. I don't even think the regional council has future agenda items on theirs.
Maybe it'll take the lead once we see ours.
Yes. Is there a bylaw that says we can't have a future agenda item?
That'll be up to the executive director.
We used to have it, so.
Does the executive director set the agenda or does the chair and the vice chair set the agenda?
Yes. executive director with the chair.
Robin, can you let Diane know that this was discussed today?
I will let her know. I would just add that my recollection is that used to be a standing item on every agenda.
I'm just saying the way it has been for a couple of years now, it's not on any of the other higher committees, not on management, not on regional council.
Right.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, to answer Keith's question, I don't think it's any of the bylaws that we can't have it. Yeah.
I don't think it's in there that says you can't either. So. I don't know. I can't answer the question today. We can post that to the executive director.
I get a clarification on that.
Yeah, I can do that.
But hopefully, if we're not violating any bylaws, the committee can choose to have it on. Yeah.
All right, next item, adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
I think Paul.
Oh, Paul, were
sorry.
you waving your hand?
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, I was remiss in letting Jose get away so quickly without thanking him for his years of service.
Like what?
Bearing the brunt of serving as chair for TPC, we really do appreciate him serving in that role and helping us muddle through lots of.
The COVID chair.
We'll let you get away this time, Jose, but
Thank you very much. We don't have a party.
we'll bring you back for more for sure.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, we had a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Adjourn.
Was there a motion on the pre?